So, hello everybody. Today we have another edition of Kittens and Keeps, where I look at role-playing games, and today I'm going to look at Germany's oldest and also most played of all role-playing games, The Dark Eye, in German, Das Schwarze Auge. This is a role-playing game that has been around for 34 years. It was first published in 1984, and this is its 5th edition. It is the only, well, it's not the only edition in English. There was one released by FanPro, and I believe it was the Dark Eye 2nd edition rules, but that never did so well. Also probably because FanPro at that time were going through a bad phase already, so there was probably not enough marketing behind it. And possibly also because what they did was they just took the German version and then translated it and handed it over to the American market, and that didn't go so well. Now this is the English edition. It has a copyright of, I believe, 2016. And it was created by Ulysses Spiele GmbH in Germany. And the 5th edition is the current rule set of the 5th edition is based on the better rules for the 5th edition, which were given to players in Germany, and then feedback was gathered over a longer period of time, and then based on the feedback the rules were refined. Some things have not changed and some people are unhappy about this, but some things have changed. I've never played any earlier versions, but I do know that in the older versions you have very, very many skills. And the skill system is quite, I don't want to say complicated, but it's quite full of flavor, because obviously it ties in with the world that you're playing in. So, it's going to be a little bit difficult to do a review of this because there is just so much to talk about. So what I will say up front is I'm going to look at the rule set, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my first getting to know the rules and also my first character creation. But I think I will do a series of videos. What needs to be understood, and I know that I'm going to attract haters when I say this, is that the Dark Eye is a lot more, it's a lot deeper and a lot broader, and that the tapestry of the story that is told does not compare to Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons, which are very shallow by comparison. It does remind me of The One Ring, although of course The One Ring is a lot newer, because I would call the world building in this game Tolkien-esque. Now, something about the world building. There is information on some things, I'm pretty sure. The story that is told in the game. The game itself has a very, very rich background, but it is essentially a historical background, and a lot of it is borrowed from European culture, Middle Ages, Renaissance. The story that's being told starts with the Emperor Hal, and Emperor Hal came into power in our terms and in our time in 1984. So everything that has happened in Aventuria, which is the main continent that this game is set in, since 1984, has happened in, if you like, almost real time. Since 1984, 34 Earth years have elapsed. That's about 45 years in game time. And during this game time, people have changed. We now have a different emperor. We actually have an empress now. So Hal has died, has come back, or well, he left and then he came back. it's a bit strange. There are some things that are going on there. But anyway, as people were playing the campaign, the world changed. So the campaign that people were playing unfolded stories that people were actually taking part in. So it's more like the Lord of the Rings, where you're suddenly cast in, let's say you're a rider of Rohan and suddenly you end up on the Pelennor fields. So you're not just playing against the backdrop of this continent with background stories that, you know, happened several centuries or thousands of years ago, and you might find an artifact or something, but you're actually part of the evolving story history of Aventuria, which is part of the campaign that has been played for 34 years. And it is true, actually, and I found this out only yesterday, that there are player characters that players have created themselves, which were then incorporated into the real campaign and which are now part of the canon, which I find very interesting. So it's actually quite an interlocking mechanism. By providing the campaign and people playing the campaign, the two come together and merge. The Dark Eye also has a very, very strong LARP community, probably because historical enactment is something that is quite big in Europe, especially Germany and France. And since one of the things which make Dark Eye so complex is that they are looking for realism. They're not really looking for having a simple system, but they're trying to do things quite a lot more realistically than the very abstracted gameplay that you find in D&D and Pathfinder. It lends itself to being LARPed, and there's even a separate LARP rule book or rule set that you can get on how to LARP. But of course, and when you have a huge LARP campaign, it's much easier to have people developing their characters at the table, take it to a LARP, and then the official campaign taking in that particular character. For those of you who, like me, are interested in translation and localization and who speak German, I would like to draw your attention to the Ulysses Spiele YouTube channel, where you can get a 45-minute video. It was a talk that was delivered at a con by the head of Ulysses Spiele about how the English version came about and what the differences are. Because it's not just a translation where, you know, maybe they changed some words, like in German, the orcs are called Schwarzpelze, which translates as black pelts. And the goblins are red pelts, Rotpelze. But of course, apparently you can't sell that in the United States because of, you know, like it would be perceived as racial slander, so they call them coal pelts and rust pelts, which makes perfect sense. Other things, in my opinion, change the game a lot more. For example, in German, and not in this book because this is the English version, you have the profession prostitute. You cannot have that apparently in an American book, which I find a bit weird, but you know, hey. Other things had to be changed as well. So there is one place in Aventuria where you have white slavers and black slaves, and of course you can't have that in the United States. So they kept the slavery theme, but obviously they enslave everyone they find. And of course, you know, things that you do when you translate, you have to change some names, blah blah blah, especially speaking names, because a lot of the names in the game, like names of towns and names of people, are actually speaking names, and they were translated. The game itself is usually played with 3d20, and it makes sense to have 3 separate colors and a number of d6s. You have 3 different races at the moment that are playable in DSA 5, and that is elves, humans, and dwarves. There is no difference between the genders, because in Aventuria in general, both men and women have similar status or identical status. There are 2 areas where we have a matriarchy, where men basically are idle and they just, you know, go out and I don't know, do artsy stuff. And then there's one that's a patriarchy where women have very little status. But this is always commented on by other Aventurian people, saying, well, this is really strange. You know, men and women are alike. What's going on there? The book itself, the rule book, clocks in at over 300 pages. And when I was creating my my character, I followed the rule book, and I have to say that I don't think it lends itself to character creation. I don't know why, I can't really put my finger on it, but it's not a game book that you can read easily. I would like to compare it to the One Ring, which is this rule book, which I was able to read from cover to cover. Understanding the rules, understanding how to create a character, and getting a lot of information in there, which was very well presented. This game book does not present its information really well. The information is there, and it can be found, and for geek gamers, because I learned from her videos that it's very important to note, does a book have an index, and is it a good index? It does have an index, and the index is brilliant, but you have to refer back to the index to find where you are. And some stuff was very badly explained. Now, I don't know if this is the translation. It could very well be. I am going to get the German one, but only the digest version, the paperback, because I'm not going to get a second one of these, because these are actually quite expensive. They're hardback, and the quality is excellent. But character creation in and of itself is a little bit complex in the game anyway, because you have so many options to choose from, but the way the book explains it is not very good. But, you know, that's the only criticism that I really have of this book. Now let's take a look at what's inside. First of all, the paper is very high quality. It's got the new book smell, which I love. The illustrations are full color, beautifully drawn. It also explains what a role-playing game is, and it starts off with how do you do skill checks and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't care about this. This shouldn't be at the beginning of a book. At the beginning of a book, I want to see how do I create a character. And then it gets a little bit into the character creation, then it gets really off. And somebody said, when you create a character für das Schwarze Auge, what you need is an Excel spreadsheet. And they are not wrong. Having an Excel spreadsheet that calculates how many points you've got left is really, really helpful. Because the game does not create characters by rolling dice, but by assigning adventure points. Adventure points, usually when you start out with your first character, you get 1,100 experience points, or adventure points, I should say, which give you an experienced character. So you're not a complete novice that doesn't know anything, but you're also not a hero with a lot of renown yet. And then you spend those. And you spend those on, for example, professions. So professions usually come with a pack. So in order to be, let's say, a Blessed of Rondra, you have to buy a certain skill set to make it possible for you to follow that profession. If you're a swordmaster, you need that. If you're a witch, you need that. If you come from a certain area, you can buy local skill sets, which basically reflect the skills that somebody would have who lives in a certain area. And that's quite nice, because it makes it easy for you to get started. Okay, so I, for example, built my first character. She's a Rondra, a Blessed of Rondra from Cyclopia. So I bought the Cyclopian area package for 16 adventure points, I believe, and then the Rondra, Blessed of Rondra Salutarist pack for 200 and whatever points. And so you buy your way through the book, as it were. And once you have everything settled, the only thing that you have to remember is when you play, it's helpful if you've got 3 D20s, and they are of different colors, and you can distinguish them very easily. Blue, red, white. So these are the colors in order of the alphabetical first letters of their names, because when you roll a test, you usually test a skill. And the skill consists of 3 different attributes, or of 3 attributes. Sometimes it's the same attribute twice. So, for example, when we look at, oh yeah, and you can have advantages and disadvantages and yada yada yada. So it's all there. When you cast a spell or when you test a skill, you have to check how you fare in the 3 different components of the skill. Let's say you have one that is made up of intuition, sagacity, and courage. So you roll your dice, Intuition would be blue, sagacity would be red because they come in this order, and then courage would be white. Now, you have a value that's usually no more than 14 for a starting character. And you also have skill points. Let's say I've got 8 skill points in this particular skill. And my sagacity is 12, my intuition is 13, and my courage is 14. So a 1 is always a success. So I've met this particular requirement. A 5 as compared to the 14 is also a success. A 17 as compared to the 14 isn't. Now I've got 8 skill points, so I can spend 3 to bring this level down by 3 to 14. So I have passed the skill and I have 5 points left. And these 5 points can be used to see what kind of quality level I've reached. So 0 to 3, 4 to 6, and so on and so forth. And the more quality levels you have, the better the outcome is. A lot of people say that this is complex. I say, no, it isn't. Have you seen the most recent version of Shadowrun? That is a complex system when it comes to die rolling, where you end up rolling dozens of dice. And this is a very, very simple, but very, in my opinion, a lot more effective and a lot more understandable system than D&D, even 5th edition, where you just roll 1 die. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I don't really know what I did there. You know, it's perception. Okay, let's roll perception. Okay, yeah, 14, whatever. So you want to roll low. And that's really all that has to be said about playing it. When you play in a combat situation, you also sometimes get to roll d6s for your damage. But all of the other skill tests are done using either 3d20s for your skills or 1d20 for your attributes. So if you just want to check your agility, for example, or your sagacity, you just roll 9 over 14, that's a pass. Like I said, this world has so much history that it can't even be contained in this book. So they didn't really put it in here. They put some things in there, but not very much, which is why you can get supplements. One could say, okay, well, yeah, that's kind of like, you know, a cheap thing, you know, to say I'm not going to put as much in here so that people have to buy more and more and more books. But I think considering that this contains also all of these spells, because spellcasting is very important in this world. You've got 2 types of spellcasters. You've got mages and you've got witches, and the blessed ones also have liturgical chants, which are kind of like magic, but not, because what you do is you don't cast a spell, but you invoke your gods or goddesses, I guess, favor to work some miracle. They are all in here. And of course, there's also information for the game master. There's also all information about what can happen to you with regard to sickness and illness. Those of you who have played Realms of Arcania, especially in the second one, Star Trail, you're constantly sick and dying. So that's quite important. Also, you know, hypothermia, how do chasers work? How can you improve your skills and attributes? You've got a small bestiary, basically, which explains the probably most important ones. You have familiars. You can have animals, and this is also my familiar and my pet. Komm her, Krümel, mach mal da Platz. Wir schauen noch jetzt hier in das Buch. Familiars, so you can have cats, toads, or ravens, equipment information, what can you get, like bandages. Also, there is weight, there is encumbrance. What kind of weapons can you have? We have orienteering aids. They have invented the South Pointer, which is a compass. And sorry about that now. Geh mal nach runter. Yeah, I've just come back from holidays and he's kind of still a little bit clingy because he was in the cattery, and it was great in the cattery, but of course it's always better at home. So you find all of this in here. It also tells you how much things are. So for example, if you want to buy dog food, you have to pay 25 silver thaler per week, and ponies and horses are of course a lot more expensive. How much do you pay for healing herbs and things like that? And then prepare and play your adventures, information for the lore master. The lore master is actually always denoted by this face mask. Also it gives you information on how to play well. And here is a list of all of the optional rules that your group can agree upon, and that's very important because then you can say, okay, let's do this this way. What I have not found yet online is a fully fillable character sheet. I've got a character sheet that consists of 4 pages. So this is, and I haven't even got all of them filled in because I haven't got any possessions yet, because I'm not going to do this until I'm playing tomorrow evening, because the others have already played 1 session and I was on holiday, but I've made my character. So this is the character sheet. You've got your personal data. Up here you've got your normal attributes: courage, sagacity, intuition, charisma, dexterity, agility, constitution and strength. Here you've got your skills, your combat sheet, which is again separate, and your equipment, and this is spells and rituals if you're a magician or a witch, and we as the blessed ones get the liturgical chants and ceremonies page. So, who is this game for? It's not for the casual gaming group. I think the Dark Eye can only be played if you're willing to immerse yourself in the world and if you're willing to become a part of it, because as you are telling the story using the supplements and the adventures that are published, you're actually living the story. And things that you do as your gaming group will actually go down in the annals of history. It is a game where fights do happen, but they're not the most important part. The most important part, in my opinion, from what I can see, and in my experience from watching playthroughs, is, yes, there is fighting, but there's much more to do with intrigue, politics. I don't think you can compare it to, let's say, Vampire, where it's all intrigue and all, politics and that kind of thing. Although probably its LARP scene is as vibrant as the Camarilla, but it is a lot more political than Dungeons and Dragons. It's not old school, oh look, there's a dungeon, okay, let's go in there. Why is there a red dragon in the dungeon? I don't care, kill it, get its treasure. This is not it. If you are a dungeon crawler, there are some dungeons in there, but it's not what this game is about. This game is about building a world and being part of this world as you're building it. And I think it's a long-term investment. I don't think one-shots work. I would like to see this as a campaign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this video now, and then I'm going to do other videos on different books that come with it. And I'm just going to give you a sneak preview of the next book that I'm going to talk about. Well, I can't because I don't have it with me. That is the Aventurische Almanach, the Aventurian Almanac, which is essentially a book that explains all about the continent itself that you need to know. Who lives there? What do they do? What kind of goods do they sell? What is their political agenda or agendas? What is their history? What is their belief system? And also the history, going back to the Dark Eons, which we don't really remember, where we have legend and myth and whatnot, and telling the story and giving you information about how this world as it is now, because that's the continent of Aventuria right here, came into being and was shaped, and who lives there and what do they do and why is it the way it is. It's not an essential book, but I would really recommend it. If you're into the Dark Eye, you should read the Aventurian Almanac. And also go to the Ulysses Spiele website and get the Aventurische Boote. So that's all from me for today. Like I said, I can recommend it, but I would say you have to be very careful and look at your gaming group, because people need to immerse themselves in this. It's not a game that you can play with a lot of, in my opinion, off-topic table talk, because that's going to destroy what you're trying to build, which is essentially a world. So talk to you soon. Bye-bye.